My name is Katarina Wangler-Björk. I'm Chief Impact Officer of Exponential Roadmap Initiative, and will have the privilege to moderate this session on exponential leadership. And what is that, you could ask? Talking about problems. Human brains are wired to talk about and go deep into problems because that's exciting, and we get people to talk and spread the bad news. But we're going to focus, of course, on solutions and also on what good looks like. So, looking at the world right now and the needs we have, the turbulence, we have concluded that we need much more leadership and true leadership, both in individuals, humans as us, but also in corporates and, of course, in policy and all other organizations. So we're looking at something we call exponential leadership, a campaign that we have invited Race to Zero and CDP to join us and to support and to highlight the good examples that we have in corporate world, in other organizations, and to dive deeper into them and see how can we replicate this, how can we scale this, how can we create the rising economy with the company and the businesses that we have. So with me today, I have these brilliant, not only speakers, but leaders that do exactly that show what goods look like. And starting here.
I'm sorry, Shannon.
Yeah, Shannon Jolie from CDP.
Yes,
Chief Marketing and we have our CEO, Johan Falk, Exponential Roadmap Initiative.
Thank you.
Very welcome, all of you. Kristina Nimele-Ström, Global Head of Supply Sustainability, IKEA. And Hanna Islop, Head of Sustainability, Unilever. And then Ms. Nigar Apadarai, COP29 Climate High Level Champion. I'm so pleased to have you all here. And we will have some time to listen to all of you, and you will have the opportunity to provide your perspectives and expertise on this specific subject. So I'd like to start with you, Juan. Could you please tell us a bit about the recent research that we've done in Exponential Roadmap and go through a bit more into detail? What do we look upon as leadership?
Thank you, Katarina. It's so fantastic to be here again this year, and we're bigger than ever. Our team is doubled since last year, so we're absolutely committed to move forward. I'll start a little bit with the big picture. Science is clear that we will need to halve emissions every decade to be able to keep close to 1.5, and now we are about 5 years after the curve. So that's the bad news. But the good news is basically that the solutions, what we call climate solutions, are scaling incredibly fast. Renewable electricity is at around 40% already, and adding capacity for like 1.5 million homes every day. It's following through an exponential curve. Electrical vehicles is, of course, the same. We are at 25% in terms of new sales. I expect we will be at 90% 2035. So this have a tremendous effect. So we are, in our view, close to bending the curve. China basically showed decreased emissions for the first time this year. So that's a starting point. And we are entering something we call the crocodile economy. So that's basically a report that we will release shortly. So what is that? Well, it's basically that we see a general trend that revenues and growth can go upwards while emissions are going downwards. And it's not just one example. We can see that in the European Union, we can see it in South Africa, we can see it in the United States. So it's a general trend. We can see the same thing for companies So first look at companies' own emissions, scope 1 and 2 emissions. Where you can see a number of examples that this crocodile gap is widening. You also see IKEA and Unilever here, which are two of the leaders we will highlight later on. But what about the value chain? Because normally we say that the value chain is maybe 25 times bigger than our scope 1 and 2 emissions. We can actually see that a number of companies are widening the gap in scope 1, 2, 3, which I think is really amazing considering that we haven't bent the curve yet on the global economy. So we really need to celebrate the companies which can do this. Once we pass the big positive tipping point, we would see so much force and companies be able to go much faster. So that's my starting point. The crocodile economy is on. Now let's move to leadership and how we talk about leadership. As far as we see it, to be a leader as a company, you should basically not just set targets and not just look at your scope 1, 2, 3. You should deliver across basically all these 4 pillars. And it's about cutting your own emissions, your supply chain emissions, but it's also about scaling up the next generation solutions and transforming your portfolio, the up curves. But we also added a new pillar in our framework, which is about mobilized finance. Mobilized finance is so important in this transformational moment that we are in. And finally, shaping policy and influencing policy, because one part which is actually blocking the transformation is policies and fossil subsidies. So this is just an example. If we talk about leadership, companies need to deliver sufficiently across all these 5 pillars. That is essential, because otherwise you would just cherry pick something which could be considered greenwashing. So this is one example that you can then excel in a particular area, which could be policy influencing, or it could be supplier engagement. For example, with your small suppliers, how you actually help to engage your small suppliers. So in different areas, think about it like Oscar categories. So that is how we're thinking. And 2 of the companies we have here, we like to highlight as doing excellent work. So IKEA, basically in reducing supply chain emissions. Specifically that you can show that you're actually reducing emissions across the complete value chain by significant numbers. And not at least, you keep on with your target to halve emissions by 2030 and also to reach 100% renewable energy across your supply chain. So that's very bold, but you're also making incredibly good results. And Unilever, which I think has shown very strong leadership in terms of policy influencing, really being clear on sharp on that we need to phase out fossil, protect nature, but also put requirements on your trade associations. So that's good examples of leadership. So to conclude there, we are entering the crocodile economy. Leadership among companies will be more important than ever, and we have excellent examples. Thank you. Back to you, Katarina.
Thank you so much. Crocodile economy it is. We're going to brand that shortly. Very interesting, and we can see all the games that we can play later on the nightcap. Just a short question on that leadership. Have you seen anything on scaling? How easy is it for corporates to learn from each other?
Yeah, that's something I should basically add. When we identify leader, it's not just a company setting a target, of course. It is delivering result on that particular practice, concrete, measurable results, which should also be tied to business results. It's not just cutting carbon, it should be connected to business. But it's also important that the company keeps a trajectory towards net zero, but also contribute in scaling the practice. We won't be better if each company just tries to solve their own thing without supporting others and actually helping to share. And I think both Unilever and IKEA is doing that, together with us and others. So
Thank you.
Talk more about that, I hope.
Thank you. Yes, we will hear a lot more.
Yeah.
Next in line, Nigar, much welcome. And we are so proud to have you also as an ambassador for this campaign. So it's a privilege to have you here with us. And I would love to hear more about your view and your expertise on what does good look like in leadership on the road to Belem, and what have you seen in progress with regards to supply chain and collaboration and SMEs, etc. What's your outlook right now?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, it's my honor to be here, and I'm so happy to see the leadership from the private sector. You know, as the COP champion, my main role, together with Dan Joshpe, COP30 climate champion, is to work with non-state actors and to see what is the role non-state actors like private sector, civil society, cities play, and be a bridge between them and negotiators. So throughout all these months, what we've seen that private sector is ready to kind of consider sustainability in their overall strategies and to help the governments in indices in all this process. Yes, they do need better dialogues with the governments. We keep hearing that quite a lot. And I think that private sector need to be incentivized to come up with, to make this green transition, you know, because if we don't create a proper ecosystem for the private sector when they can come up with solutions, we will not be achieving it. Because you know that one of the main outcomes of COP29 was this climate finance goal. It was 300 billion that was agreed upon with among the nations, among the countries, and the main goal is to scale it up to 1.3 trillion. And this is something that needs private finance, it needs philanthropies, it's not only up to public finance. So the role of a private sector is becoming bigger and bigger. And some of you that know me by this time know that I'm a very strong supporter of the idea of SMEs, and within the large companies, supply chains, how SMEs are being supported. That's something that we've been pushing quite a lot now. And together with the Climate Champions team, we came up with this, you know, climate proofing SME campaigns to support small and medium enterprises in making this green transition. You know, and I'm happy to see here the, you know, supply chain emissions aspect that Johan has just mentioned. But what I think we need to also explore more is the AI and technologies. That's something that we do not put enough focus, if you ask my personal opinion, you know, because AI is here, it's changing the way that industries are working. It changed the way that that labor market will be operational in the years to come. It already changes the way we see. It changes the way that governments operate. It changes the way that we learn and we do our research. And it's our biggest risk and it's our biggest fear and hope. That's what I feel like when I think about, you know, artificial intelligence being part of our life. So what can we expect? Is it going to come up with this kind of development as Prometheus, you know, if we refer to the myth, or it's going to be an apple of Eve? I'm referring to it to show what are the aspects. How are we using this AI element? Because it can, if we speak about the global climate action, it should become our ally. And this is how we need to treat. And I think that technological breakthroughs is something that we need to strive for more, as opposed to coming up with new restrictions. You know, it should be going in parallel. So yes, we need to work with private sector more. We need to create ecosystems for private sector more. We need to incentivize private sector more. And private sector need to understand its responsibility. It's the both ways. And we need all the sectors on board. As COP29 champion, I'm working very closely with COP30 presidency, and COP30 presidency is coming with unified action agenda. You heard, I'm sure that many of you that follow the processes know that by now. So they are splitting they are kind of creating a base of all the initiatives that were done so far, and it's more than 600 initiatives because every COP is coming with new initiatives. And they are creating this, 6 axes, as the presidency calls it, to bring some efficiency to the process. So my call to everyone is to be part of this process, to come up with feedback, with questions, with solutions, because the presidency is very open to feedbacks. And together with champions and COP30 presidency and UNFCCC, we are trying to build this open dialogue with non-state actor community. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to mention that. And yes, again, coming up to small and medium enterprises, that's the main focus of our work now, because there are 3 aspects and 3 priorities for us. It's first is the access to finance, and here we have launched the finance sprint with the climate champions team to help small and medium enterprises to understand how they can access finance. It's a capacity building and supply chains. We are working with large companies to help them to consider SME aspect in their supply chains. So overall, that's the plan that we have now.
Thank you so much. Exciting, and also exciting with bringing in the AI component, which is coming up also in all discussions here, I think, in this week, but also in general. AI and leadership, and how do we use this for good, and how do we ensure that it's aligned with Earth and planetary boundaries. Thank you so much. Going to one of our corporate leaders, Christina from IKEA. I'm looking so much forward to hear what you have accomplished and the learnings that you've had in your work with your supply chain and renewable transition. Can you tell us a bit more about what you've done and what you achieved?
Yeah. Thank you so much. And of course, we are all on this journey to get to the state of the world that we need to have it for humans and for dogs alike, so we can thrive on this planet. And what we do then in IKEA, I think it's good to put it in context. Any product that we do, or any idea, it has to fulfill different perspectives, not only sustainability. It is form, it is function, it is quality, it's sustainability, and it is to a low price. Because we are for the many people who do not sit with the thick wallets. So we need to do this all the time. I think it's very important because you cannot have business cases that doesn't drive all these 5 perspectives, which makes the work even more so difficult. But as I many times say, if you want an easy job, this is not the job. So we have those jobs as well. This is not one of them. So if you look at the climate impact then from our operations and our products, it is very much in material. 52% of IKEA's footprint is from material, and in production and transportation is like 5%. So 9 and 5%. So it's quite much there. So it's energy transformation and material transformation we're working on. And you're asking about the renewable electricity that you also mentioned here, Johan. So we started a project because we saw that our suppliers, they did not have access to renewable electricity. And if they had, it was too expensive. And they didn't know how to go about it. So we mapped our supply chain. We saw that where we have the biggest need of this is in China, India, and Poland. So we started with these 3 countries, and we started to support our suppliers. We put resources in place. We went to actually negotiate and bundle the volumes for the suppliers to then actually buy onto this. We started also to put strict goals. So we said by 25, actually, need to be 100%. And either you do it with us or you do it alone. So people join. And now we are starting the wave 3. So we have now wave 1 was those 3 countries. We added 10 more 2 years ago, and now we added, so we are total 27 countries. So that means we are covering almost 95% of the electricity need from our suppliers. So this has been, and we did this in 3 years. And I think to focus on this really and, have clear goals, and then we are supporting the suppliers, so not leaving them alone with this. And they learn from each other. And also, would there be like a short-term increase, in these power purchase agreements we've done and so forth? We also then put in energy efficiency programs so that we are offsetting. Since we have these 5 criteria, as I said in the beginning, we call it democratic design. We need to work to make this also profitable. And that we have done today.
Very good, very interesting. And just adding to your last point there on being profitable, what do you see, what kind of business values do you see that you gain from this initiative?
I mean, first of all, the suppliers, of course, we're talking about AI and data. You need to know your business.
Yeah.
So you need to know where is the energy consumption, where is it also a leakage, and where can you actually save as well. So it's not only transforming from fossil to renewable, to also take down the use. So I think that we know our supply chains much better today. And also it's tying us closer together, and we like that. We see our suppliers as our partners. We call them that. I mean, in the average year that we have in the relationships is 11 years. It's longer than most marriages, actually. So, you know who you should work with, and we will do that from 11 years to up to 50, 60 years. So I think also these kind of things, when we go into it together and they see that we mean it for real.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lot of motivation, and actually it's also triggering the industry in that country, for instance, to follow suit. So I think this case, not everything is only positive, but in this case, I think it was kind of a school book example when things went well.
Yeah. Lovely. And I mean, school book examples, they're for learning. So what would you advise any other company that want to replicate what you've done?
I mean, first, of course, you need to really want it. It cannot be lip service only. You need to want to do it and put some resources in, and then work together with suppliers and partners. And also if you have other, like if you are in a specific geographical location, maybe you can also pair together with, like we did something with H&M together, and also WWF helping us from an NGO perspective. So you can find, the collaborators around you. So you're not alone in this. And like, of course, with the Exponential roadmap, we got, this wonderful playbook here, how to work. So I think that, know your business, know where you have your pain points, put people to it, put clear goals, and not too long timelines, and get going. And then rather say, okay, this is a little bit difficult now with legislations coming, because, you need to have substantiate everything, but to have ambitions and then go towards it. And our experience is that normally it works. People also feel immense amount of pride. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. So good for celebration.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then Hanna, looking at what you've done with Unilever and advocacy and policy, you've done tremendous progress. Can you tell us a bit about what you've done?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks very much for having me here. So everyone probably knows Unilever. We're a huge consumer goods company, 400 brands, operate in 190 countries. And we have an incredibly kind of diverse and complex portfolio, from mayonnaise to toilet bleach to ice cream to, prestige skincare products, etc. So that diversity of product kind of translates into an incredibly complex and diverse supply chain. And about 75% of our Scope 3 emissions come from our upstream suppliers of ingredients and packaging, raw materials and services. So, we've set ourselves really ambitious Scope 3 reduction goals, but, we have supply chains embedded in sectors such as agriculture and chemicals, which are, significant to us, but where we're not a huge player with masses of leverage. And again, we have that kind of diversity in terms of the levers that we have to pull to reach our targets, which, we have kind of, in our transition plan, we have 10 different levers. We don't have any kind of single bullets that we can just focus on. We have to make progress, against kind of reformulation and logistics and aerosols and forest risk commodities. So we have this huge diversity and these value chains kind of embedded in sectors that are quite tricky to shift. And we know that, if we don't, even if we are making big efforts to reduce our emissions, if these sectors aren't shifting at the same time, we're going to have a very, very difficult and expensive time of it. And so, it just makes sense to us, therefore, to advocate for the policies and the enabling frameworks which are going to, help those sectors to transition. And so we've always taken the view that, that will help us as a company not just because it'll help us to meet our targets, but because actually, even if we meet our targets, then yes, we might be exposed to less kind of transition risk, but actually, unless we, actually make the difference in terms of emissions reduction overall, we're still exposed to significant physical climate risk as well. So that's probably the main reason actually why we really put a lot of effort into policy and advocacy.
Thank you. Can you share some examples how you made it and how you have collaborated and what has been important?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Johan's graphic shows, we think about it on kind of multiple levels. So at a global level, and we've always done this all the way back to our sort of CEO Paul Polman. We've always been sort of very much out there at kind of global moments like COPs, and UN General Assemblies, etc., and being part of leadership coalitions like We Mean Business, etc. Writing to the the G20 or the G7 before COPs, or asking for stronger nationally determined contributions, etc. So we've always kind of been that, providing that kind of global leadership. But I think more recently, what we've seen is that, whilst we continue to do that, we've got a bit more kind of specific, both kind of in terms of the geography and then the topic. And so we've actually started to put more resource into the kind of unlocks of our Scope 3 emissions, where the geography meets the sort of the decarbonisation lever, essentially. So, for example, a lot of our emissions of our home care business come from the kind of chemicals footprint we have in India. And so, focusing there, working with the Indian government, working with specific state governments, on having a kind of joint vision for what fossil-based chemicals for the transition to renewable and recycled feedstocks, and what that could look like for India, has been something that we've got a lot more specific about. Similarly, working in Indonesia, around kind of forest protection and restoration, talking about how we put in place better frameworks and incentives for regenerative agriculture and to support farmers, to transition to regen ag when you might get a kind of a period of volatility or lower yields or whatever it might be. So yeah, we've got a bit more granular and specific about about the unlocks in our transition plan that need focus. And then finally, we have, over the last couple of years, really focused on our trade associations as well, because we know that trade associations are, really powerful actors, and they don't always necessarily reflect the views of the most, the most progressive companies. And so about 2 years ago, we commissioned an independent review of the climate policies of our main trade associations. The reviewers that we employed looked at our biggest 27 trade associations globally, and they went, they sort of looked at a review of publicly available material, and then told us, kind of the extent to which they were aligned with our stated climate policy positions and the 1.5 degree ambition of the Paris Agreement. We did that first in 2024, and then we've just about 6 months ago, we released our second one, and we actually then, compared the two and tried to see, whether there was any differences that we could pull out in terms of progress. And out of the 27 trade associations that we looked at, we saw a kind of an improvement in terms of the number of trade associations that were kind of considered aligned with no areas of misalignment, important difference, to our climate policies. Went from 13 in 2024 to 18 in 2025. And there's some nuance to that. And obviously, we found that things like areas where a trade association might be considered not aligned, but then wasn't particularly active on a topic. And so I think the challenge now is actually about moving associations that are kind of not necessarily considered obstructive or misaligned, but actually to a position of proactive engagement and sort of an impact. And I think we see, lots of opportunities to, work with other like-minded companies to kind of make sure that these trade associations are kind of being engaged really actively, and sort of make that transition.
Exciting. Thank you so much. Very, very exciting. And I hope we'll talk more about that later on. Going to you, Shannon. You work for CDP, and you work with lots of data and real fact-based expertise. What do you think when you hear all these experiences and also about the crocodile economy? Does it fit with your view and what you've seen the last couple of years?
Thank you, Katarina. So, yes, I promise I am working for a data organization, but I won't be talking about percentages and numbers. keeping it very human here. We have really great examples of leaders here on the stage. And what CDP brings is that global macro view. We run the world's environmental disclosure system, which is a voluntary system based on investor requests and also corporate requests to get this information collected from supply chains or portfolio companies. And what we then see in the big is what the world is doing on a standardized and harmonized way, right? Because we all want a level playing field. We want to have things comparable. And so that's CDP's really important role that we're playing, so that no matter what the context is globally, you have a system which can collect this information and redistribute it. So what we're seeing is actually a lot of the examples that have been shown here. Not only collecting this information is hard, but influencing the decision makers within organizations with this information is exceptionally hard, right? Because this information has always been seen as alternative data sets. It's been seen as something that maybe goes into a sustainability report. And the crocodile economy, which I love, CDP has just kind of played around with what we're calling the Earth positive economics. So it's taking the fundamentals of economics and bringing in indicators and data sets that are part of the environmental data set, whether it be on the risk side of things or opportunity identification side of things, and thinking about economics in a much more holistic manner. And what we're seeing is that those companies and leaders that are bringing to their boards of trustees this information, which is board grade, it's bringing out risks that are, maybe sitting unseen until then they're seen, bringing in opportunities about how, they can transition and get ahead to their boards. Those are the companies who are really, setting the example and making progress. And we're actually seeing at a global scale those companies that have been making progress against their environmental targets and also their bottom line. They've been doing that and following their peers in market cap for the past 10 years who haven't been making the same investments. So within a sector view of that, we're actually seeing some sectors come out on top. Some sectors, when they're making the investments in their environmental transition and their target setting, they're actually beating their competitors and peers by over 10% in the same time period. But those are sectors that have good policy headwinds, whereas other sectors that are being more penalized by the policy headwinds are actually the ones who are just kind of staying on par. So I think where we see things now with the price of renewable energies dropping, and we're seeing that the pricing of nature's resources into the balance sheets is only getting us farther ahead as a company. So some of the levers that corporations are pulling in order to actually make the change happen internally is making sure that they are engaging their supply chains and getting the Scope 3 emissions data as much as possible, working with them as partners, as we've heard here with Inca Group. But also they're linking executive pay to achieving their environmental short-term targets and long-term targets. They are pricing carbon internally so that there's an internal carbon price that is attached to everything that they do and decisions that they make, whether it be travel budgets like coming here to New York. They're actually making sure that there's a carbon budget that's appropriate and rolled out. And that goes all the way down to, of course, products and asset level, not just, I would say T&E. And they're also just making sure that they are adapting their transition plans with credible transition plans and making sure that it's not an accounting piece, right, to kind of say that they're always on track by changing numbers left and right. They're actually admitting when they have undershot their target and how they need to think about reassessing their strategy and or pulling different levers. So the data is telling us that the awareness of these core kind of these data sets are no longer alternative. They're completely fundamental. However, the ability to take that all the way up to a board level engagement is where I think we need some, coalescing, because corporations, once you see this information, you can't unsee it. So yeah.
And what to dive deeper into what and how do we bring to the board? What kind of governance practices? How can we enforce that?
So we've been thinking a bit about this. I mean, this year at Davos with the World Economic Forum and Oliver Wyman, but also with Johan Rockström's planetary health check, they were producing the planetary health and kind of what those indicators. So we stood up kind of a sister report that is corporate health check and looking at the key indicators that we see at a global macro scale that need to be the fundamental indicators that every board is looking at on a quarterly basis, if they can, rather than an annual basis. And so we have kind of the board's playbook, if you will, as to here's the key indicators. If you don't know how these are performing for your own company and within your supply chain, then you need to go and get those answers and information. So we're working on kind of version 2 of the corporate health check to come out in January 2026, and hopefully seeing more than we had about 10% of companies who were in the exponential leadership category of who were not only disclosing, setting targets, taking action, and achieving action, but there was about I would say 30% who were doing what they needed to do, but not actually pulling all the levers and making use of the data in the way that they should. So what we're hoping is to see more and more actionable kind of strategies come out of the disclosure mechanism, and we can stand that up year on year next to the planetary health. And hopefully we'll start to see that corporate action and planetary health start to get in the green.
Thank you. Really interesting. Really, really inspiring. And lovely to hear you all. And looking at all of you in the panel, we have the leaders here. So how can we get all others on board? I mean, if you are the innovators and leaders of corporates, how can we get the whole economy to switch and to learn about these cases and that it's possible, and also, I mean, the correlation on investing in sustainability and getting business performance? Anyone wants to just give it a shout?
Well, sure. I mean, collaborating, these platforms like you guys have set up, I think are really important. And to always believe in the work and not just the, sometimes what we say versus the work that we put in are discorrelated. So we've all seen that in different corners of or pockets of the world, there's been some, I would say, kind of rhetoric that there's a lot of pullback and that, this information is no longer, well, I guess the wave of kind of sustainability is kind of receding. And actually, I think just believing in doing the work, like I said, once you see something and it comes into your business strategy, you can't unsee it. So it's the commitment, I think, that is really, really important, and making sure that as, whether it be in sector kind of peer groups, whether it be in forums in which you can reinforce that the work is being done. We are so thrilled to see that in 2025, which has been a very, very tough year, corporate disclosure and a voluntary mechanism through CDP is on par with last year, and maybe we'll see in November going to hit another record disclosure stat, which was, I think a few months ago, unthinkable. We thought that there would be a lot of pullback from voluntary reporting, and it's not the case. And I think it's because we see the value behind the information and the data, and not only to the corporate itself, but to the entire ecosystem. Right? We have this information flowing into Bloomberg terminals the world round, into London Stock Exchange and S&P, and to see the data holes that might come about if ever the disclosure mechanism goes away is a very scary thing to see. And so I think that people realize that it's not a reporting kind of tick the box exercise. It is, I need to have, this is the lifeblood information for me to be able to inform strategy and decision making going forward. So in terms of your question, I think the more that corporate leaders can show that exponential leadership in aligning to the work and committing to the work, rather than when it's just a good opportunity for them from a PR angle, but maybe when it's actually even going out on a limb during a very difficult time to say, yeah, we're still doing the work. And that'll just keep everybody's momentum going.
Thank you. Christina, you're nodding. Do you want to add?
Yeah, I want to add that, of course, in times where maybe there's some distraction, if I say like that, from the agenda, I think it's even more important to say that we are staying on course. We just updated our sustainability strategy. We have now decided to do it annually because the pace of change is fast. So we need to also put the goals tough and yet being able to sustain them. Substantiate them. But it's very important that we say we are not backing on our commitments. We are staying true. And we will learn, and we will go, and we will spread. Because like what you say, how do we get more to join? I mean, like what we're doing here, we're sharing maybe some of the good examples, humbly saying that, but to get all the good ideas, because the ideas are out there, solutions are out there. I think we come to the point there where I think the discussion, yes, boardrooms are very important, but boardrooms are not the ones doing the work. So we need to move the dialogue from the boardrooms out to reality, into implementation, and make it happen. But of course we need to have the full business case also in the boardrooms, taking the discussion and the decisions. And I think most important is that sustainability is business. You cannot make any business decision today where, for instance, innovation part, being it AI or whatever, new material or new energy solutions, it's affecting the entire business. So I'm a little bit tired about that. What about you with sustainability? I'm a businesswoman. I work with totality. I need to think about, the cost and the profit and humans, linked to these dogs, as we talked about before. So we need to take all these perspectives in. And it's only when we look at totality and not in silos where we find the solutions. Because yes, there could sometimes in a short run be an extra additional cost, if I say, for sustainability. For sure, there's investments. But that, I think, investment is not a cost. That's actually your future competitiveness that you are investing in. But if it is so, then we have to work on the reduction somewhere else. But as long as we, now as sustainability professional, if I drive my agenda and only talk sustainability, it will not work. I need to understand the language of the business, and I need to speak it, and I need to be able to work with P&Ls, ROIs, and, get work done. And if we do that, we need to do it, so other people hear it, do it together with others, pooling on, resources and data. The data we need is all the same data. Of course, we need to go in over the traceability train and everything. Let's do it together. So I'm hopeful with that. I choose hope, not despair.
Thank you, thank you. We choose hope, and we have good practices. Nigar, you want to add?
Yeah, just generally speaking, if we speak, your question was that how can we take everyone on board? And I think that if we speak about the governments, we live in a world of uncertainty. We live in a world of wars, trade wars, and international law that is not working in many cases. So it's a very uncertain times. We need a set of rules which would be applicable for all the countries, large and small nations. That's something that we need from international law perspective. But from a private sector perspective, we obviously need ecosystems, incentives for private sector to come up with new solutions and technologies. But what we also need is awareness building. When I joined the climate community, I was really seeing that the whole conversation is extremely complicated, and people outside of this room, in many cases, in many countries, have no idea what climate change is, how it impacts lives of many people around the world. It impacts lives of different regions, people in different regions differently, but it does impact all of us, so we are all in it together. So we need awareness building to simplify it, to simplify rhetoric, to make sure that we are, people change their consumer behavior in many cases. And there are, simple habits that we need to do, like on top of all that we need from governments, from private sector, and from everyone. So yeah, I think that awareness building is also extremely important.
Thank you so much. We are soon closing this panel. Hanna, do you want to add something? What do we need?
I was going to add, I've been really excited recently by some of the work that's happening with our supplier climate program, which is our way of taking, we've got many thousands of suppliers, but actually taking the most high impact suppliers and working with them. And this work's been going on for a few years, but it's really ramping up and deepening. And what is particularly exciting is that we're starting to work with banks like HSBC to help finance our suppliers to make some of the changes that they need in their supply chains. And I just think that is a example of Unilever's leverage helping to unlock those improvements in a way that will help not just our Scope 3 emissions, but other people's Scope 3 emissions and our suppliers is really positive. And I think that's that way of finding your leverage point in your supply chain where you can really act and play a role that only you can play to move the needle is really important.
Excellent. Thank you so much. A few last words on overtime. Johan, how do you conclude this? What do we bring from here to the crocodile economy?
I think to get many more on board, I think we are at this inflection point. We're moving into what we call this crocodile economy. And we need to shift from sharing of burdens to actually positive race to the top. So the companies, as the countries, really start to challenge and compete to win the new economy, to scale up the solutions. And that is also the way to come from a sustainability focus that we're actually covering all parts of the company, public affairs, finance, product, business development, as well as supply chain management, the complete company. So we need this leadership more than ever because we're very close to that point. So to go in the front line and to show it is achievable and that companies stay on course is so incredibly important.
Thank you so much, and thank you for showing the way and leading the way. A warm hand for our panel and for these leaders.